Stop.
This meeting is being
Okay, everybody. Seems like we've got sync now, at least. So welcome again to the Buddhist Path of Awakening. We're on the third volume, chapter 15, Transcending Mental Concepts. And we're going to start by doing something, just a little meditation, as it were. Really, this is beyond meditation. You just bring your awareness here, very naturally. It's not focused on anything in particular. You're aware of anything and everything that is presenting itself to you, sights, sounds, tactile sensations. I saw someone chewing something, and that's fine. And then that is presenting itself to you, the taste. And of course, thoughts, but thoughts come and go. And when they go, there is just this clear, limpid awareness right now. Awake, aware of anything and everything. This awareness is foundational. It's always here. It gets covered over by our thoughts from time to time, and then the thoughts dissipate, dissolve, and here we are again. Just awake. It has no particular virtue. It's not like we're better for it. There's no one judging, and yet it's completely awake in the present moment. This awareness goes by different names in the teachings. Tonight we're calling it Rikpa, which is a Tibetan word, usually translated as something like pristine awareness. Even that is glorifying it a little bit, perhaps unnecessarily, but it is. It's very pristine, it's clear, there's no taint, and it's aware. Rikpa, that's the Tibetan. The Sanskrit for it is vidya. So tonight, this is a very short chapter, and it's going to be a short class, I think. We're just lining out some of the terms that are going to be used later in later chapters as we go along. He starts by talking about more samsaric mind, lo. Lo is just a word that means mind, and it has different modalities. The first one is methodical mind. It has to do with thinking in a very clear, conceptual, but logical way. It's not particularly transcendent. Rikpa is transcendent. It has no thought in it. It's just clear awareness, always here. Lo comes and goes. It's thinking mind, it's doing mind, it's categorizing mind. He said it's very methodical and orderly. It just tries to gather information and come to conclusions. That's what lo is. That's an aspect of thinking mind. We have this thinking mind. At the lowest level, thinking mind is called sem, S-E-M. That's the Tibetan. In the Sanskrit, it's chitta. And chitta is thinking mind of I and other and thoughts and all that, good and bad. Lo is a little bit higher. Lo has to do with intelligence, with categorizing and understanding and making things happen in a particular way that we need to have happen. It's like you use your lo in planning for your dinner. He said it's almost animal level of being decent. It's not theoretical. It's something that you do on a day-to-day level. You think about, well, what am I going to have for dinner? Oh, let's have some salad, so I better make some salad. And you get out the salad bowl and you get out the lettuce, and lo is doing all this methodically, logically. Somebody needs to mute themselves, by the way. Let me take a look. And there are different kinds of lo. There's ordinary lo, which is purely samsaric but very business-like, he says. Conventionally sane and regular, like I got to pay the bills, I have to go to work, got to take care of my family, and so forth. What is going on now? Barry, can you see me?
Yes, everything appears okay.
Okay, my screen just changed and now it's back again. We're having a night. The Duns. We're past Dun season, but they still show up.
Back to Rigpa.
No. So we're just learning terms here. There are different kinds of ordinary lo. You know, the term lojong, training the mind, has to do with this. There's lopam, which means defeated mind, and there is lote, which means trustworthiness. In the Vajrayana, he says we are transcending ordinary lo, both types, the disappointed, and the trustworthy. All together, we're developing lo that is free from habitual tendencies. All together. How do we do this? By coming back into this present moment, clear, awake, here and now. As soon as we go back into thinking mind, we're back into lo. The third type, there is a sort of transcendental lo, which is called lo dru. Lo dru, sometimes pronounced lo dro. I have a friend whose refuge name is lo dro. And it's almost at the level of prajna, lo dru. It means that when it's actually close to seeing things as they are, intellect in the higher sense. So more likely referring to the transcendental form of lo, which is definitely free from habitual patterns, as well as from regular discursive lo. To be free from habitual patterns is really getting towards intelligence. Rigpa, this clear open awareness that is our foundation, is completely free from habitual patterns. It has nothing to do with that. It's like clear air, intelligent, awake, crisp, revealing. So lo is the result of sem, or conceptual mind. And when we go beyond the habitual patterns of mind, you're going to go beyond lo. The term for this is lo de, which means you're going beyond lo, and you're going beyond habitual patterns of mind. The naming, the conceptual. He says, lo itself does not go very high. For lo, there is nothing higher than lo dro. But transcendent sem goes beyond lo dro. Now, transcendent sem is a term that I've never come across before until this chapter. It was created by a great teacher in the 19th century named Mipam. Mipam, he was a Nyingma master. And it's just another term for Rigpa. So I think we stay with Rigpa. Rigpa is used by everybody. All the teachers, for instance, Tsoknyi Rinpoche talks endlessly about Rigpa, and other teachers as well. So we needn't worry too much about this term. It's sort of a by the way that there is this term transcendent sem, which is a synonym for Rigpa. Trungpa Rinpoche calls this first thought, best thought. What happened was he had an encounter. He met Allen Ginsberg. Allen Ginsberg came and presented himself, and there was a very explosive meeting between the two, after which we, his students who were there at the time, thought that we would never see Allen again, or if we did, he would become a devoted student of Trungpa Rinpoche, and in fact, the latter is what happened. And the two of them used to write poems together, and Rinpoche always told Allen, in fact, what caused this huge explosion initially was Rinpoche asking Allen to make up poetry on the spot, not to say something that he'd already memorized, a poem that he'd written before, or the poem of another poet that he'd memorized. Allen was very much into Blake, Songs of Innocence and Experience, William Blake, and other poets. And Rinpoche asked him not to do that, to just make a poem right on the spot. There's a long tradition of this in the Tibetan tradition and in the Indian tradition. It's called doha. Doha means poems that it's actually songs that are sung about reality. And Rinpoche was asking Allen to do this, and Allen failed initially, but eventually, after a lot of work, story I won't go into now, he got into it. And Rinpoche and he used to create poems together. And Rinpoche called this first thought, best thought, because you are saying the first thing that it's like, here we are, whatever comes into your mind, without preconception, without any kind of agenda, without trying to accomplish anything. You say what you see, what arises. It's beyond thought, it's before thought. And he called it first thought, best thought. He says, Rigpa, going back to Rigpa, is discovery beyond ignorance, beyond avidya. Avidya is always about I and other. When we are thinking about myself, about others, we are lost in avidya, ignorance, ignoring. That's what the term literally means. The term ignorance is a translation, an English translation of the Sanskrit word avidya. Remember, vidya is the Sanskrit for Rigpa, and is a negative. It's denying it. So avidya is saying no vidya. That's what ignorance is. We are ignoring this fundamental ground of our intelligence and our being, this clear awareness. Avidya, not vidya. Ignoring vidya. And this is what is usually translated as the fundamental ignorance that produces samsara and suffering and confusion and confused, unenlightened sentient beings. They're all of us, stuck in avidya. Every time we get stuck in avidya, we are a confused, sentient being. And when we let go of that and attach to vidya, which is the Sanskrit for Rigpa, then here we are, clear, awake. Whatever is in the room, you're aware of it, your body, your seat on the cushion, this voice that you're hearing. It's completely clear, natural, effortless. Effortlessness is the key. As soon as there's effort, you're trying to get somewhere, do something, some kind of ambition. You let go of that effort, and here we are, in Rigpa, in vidya, not in avidya. So he says, talking about vidya again, that there is a term for a great teacher called, it's a vidyadhara, vidyadhara, vidya holder. Vidyadhara is the way it's pronounced, vidyadhara, Dhara. And the Tibetan for it is Rigzin. Rig, as in Rigpa, Zin, as in holder. The Karmapa, the 16th Karmapa, gave Trungpa Rinpoche the title Vidyadhara. And that's the way we referred to him, as the Vidyadhara, he who holds Vidya, he or she, but in this case a he. The holder of Rigpa, the holder of Vidya. And this is a very high teacher, very high. We're being exhorted to live in Vidya. That means we give up all the scheming of samsaric mind, of sem, which is always about I and other, trying to jockey for some kind of position, trying to protect this fictional I that doesn't actually exist, to tell a story in which I prevails over difficulties and harm. And I is just a story. It's a fiction. It's just like a thing you watch on television. And we get stuck in these stories. And Vidya, Rigpa, is about waking up from them to this simple, natural, clear awareness. You might ask, can I make dinner with Vidya? And the answer is absolutely, you can. You might make it in a more experimental or in creative way. Trungpa Rinpoche, I remember first time I watched him cook, he roasted oranges. I guess he wanted to see what they would be like. After that, I did most of the cooking for a while. So we've got Vidya, Vidyadhara, Rigzin, these terms. He says Rigpa is regarded as the highest development, more or less, on the level of Yeshe. Now, Rigpa refers to intelligence, what sees, Yeshe refers to what is. It's the union, it's this. It's the union of knowingness and being. That all of this is arising as being and it's known. And this is Yeshe. Yeshe is translated usually as wisdom, a poor translation. The literal meaning of the word Yeshe, if you analyze it etymologically, Ye means primordial, before time, before beginning or end. It's this. This was here before you ever knew about it, before anything. And She is knowing, is the root of the word to know. Shepa, knowingness. So Yeshe means primordial knowing. And it refers to everything, your room, your walls, your body, the sounds, everything. And all of this is arising, and it's referring to the sort of the beingness of it. Yeshe. And Rigpa is the clear lens. It's like having your glasses on that allows you to perceive in the way of Yeshe. You're not actually seeing Yeshe because it's not a subject object, but you are seeing in the manner of Yeshe, in the manner of total non-dual. Yeshe is non-dual. There is no I and other. There's no knower and known. Everything is arising as it is right now. Look around. Everything is arising known. This is Yeshe. And it's this non-dual knowing. There's no knower, no known. It's just as it is. Ta-ta-ta, as they say in the Sanskrit. Then he talks a bit about the term prajna, which is a slightly lower level, but still sane term. And it really refers either to a faculty or what you see. And what it really has to do with is seeing things stripped of good and bad, of all the trips and labels that we put on things. Evaluative. It's seeing them as they are, in their own right, without my agenda. So prajna has to do with this faculty of being able to do that. It's really within Rigpa. These terms, and I guess he's just introducing them to us so that we can go on and deal with these texts. Yeshe, going back to Yeshe, he says it is the universal monarch, or fruitional level. It is even free from the path. There is no notion of path in Yeshe, in this primordial awake being. There's nowhere to go. There's no way to improve. It's already perfect as it is. So he says, simply becoming free from habitual patterns or transcending low is how we get to Rigpa and Yeshe. How do we get free from habitual patterns? We see them and we let them go. Just like in meditation tonight, when Sue said, as soon as you see your thought that you're thinking, you're not anymore, you're back. That is becoming free from habitual pattern. That is coming back to Rigpa, if you could recognize it. He says, Yeshe is related to Dharmakaya, which is actually a shortened form of Yeshe Chirku. Yeshe means Yeshe, we've discussed this, primordial knowing. Chirku is Dharmakaya in Tibetan. The Sanskrit is Dharmakaya. The Tibetan is Chirku. Chir means Dharma, Kaya, Ku means Kaya. Dharmakaya. And what is Dharmakaya? Dharmakaya is reality. It's this, in which nothing actually has any true existence. Everything is a constant presentation of sight, sound, smell, taste, touch, and mental events, constantly arising and passing away. You can't grasp it. As soon as you try to grasp it like these words, they're gone. Like this image that's constantly changing on your computer screen. So Dharmakaya refers to this reality aspect of this world, that nothing has any true being, and yet it appears. It appears, and yet it has no true being. This is a slogan in the Vajrayana. Things appear, and yet they don't have any true being. They have no true being, and yet they appear so beautifully. The maroon of this sweater, the pink of this cheek, the sound of the voice, and the same for all of us. So Yeshe is related to Dharmakaya. Yeshe is referring to the knowingness aspect of Dharmakaya. He says Dharmakaya, or Chirku in Tibetan, means being in a state of Yeshe, of Jnana or Yeshe. Jnana is the Sanskrit, Yeshe is the Tibetan. So the Dharmakaya, the state of this reality that we live in, is in the state of Yeshe, primordial being. So he says in the Vajrayana, Yeshe Chirku, or Jnana Dharmakaya, means full of wisdom. So in order to experience the Dharmakaya, you have to be filled with Yeshe, Jnana, you have to be one with it. And then you begin to experience reality as it is, this world, as a constant, non-existing, but constantly presenting experience. So I'm going to stop there. This is a short chapter and very pithy, and we'll probably have a very short class tonight, but we can have a discussion. Yeah, this is we're getting to the heart of it, the profundity. I want to tell you the teachings go on and on from here, but they always revolve around these key terms. Yeshe, Tibetan, Sanskrit is Jnana. Dharmakaya, Sanskrit, Tibetan is Chirku. And they get very beautiful. So, comments or questions? Conversation stopper? How does it go with that?
Appropriately, Lodro.
Lodro, okay. Oh, Lodro, yeah.
Thank you, John. That was wonderful. I have a question. So you said that the Vidyadhara, the term for Vidyadhara on Tibetan is Rikstem?
The term for Vidyadhara?
Yes.
Vidya, we've discussed, it means this clear seeing faculty that sees reality. And Dhara, D-H-A-R-A, it's usually transliterated into Roman letters, means holder. So it's right. Vidya holder.
And in Tibetan, the translation is Rigden, right?
Rigzin, yeah, R-I-G
Rigzin.
For Vidya, D-Z-I-N for Dhara.
Understood. So it is not the same word as on the dedication of merit from the Shambhala tradition. May the lotus garden of the Rigden's wisdom bloom. It's not the same.
That's a different word. That Rigden, R-I-G in the Roman letters, D-E-N. And what that means is holder of the family. It's a different rig. You see, the thing is, Tibetan is so monosyllabic that you get a lot of the same sounds for different words. Chinese is even more so. There's a famous sentence in Chinese that goes something like ma 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 ma, and it's all about a man beating his horse or a woman beating her horse. And well, Tibetan isn't that as monosyllabic as Chinese, but it is very monosyllabic. So you get a lot of repetition of sounds meaning different things. They're spelled differently, just as in Chinese you have different characters for each of those ma sounds.
In the dedication of merit, may the lotus garden of the Rigden's wisdom bloom. Who is the Rigden? Question here.
The Rigden is the king of Shambhala, and he represents all of what we've been talking about tonight. He represents Rigpa, Yeshe. He represents primordial awareness.
Thank you.
He's the king of Shambhala. He's the king of enlightened world. What we're talking about here is enlightenment itself. I was thinking of how about the lineage chant? The nature of thoughts is Dharmakaya, as is said. Nothing whatever, but everything arises from it. That's so perfect. Nothing whatever, but everything arises from it. Nothing whatever, because nothing has any true being at all. It's just a constant apparition. And so everything that we see, all of this stuff, has no true being, and yet it's a constant presentation. It's like we're living in the middle of a three-dimensional movie. The nature of thoughts is Dharmakaya, as is said. Nothing whatever, but everything arises from it. To this meditator who sees the spontaneous play of the mind, that's this spontaneously arising and passing. Grant your blessings so that my meditation is free from conception, free from grasping, free from holding on, free from habitual patterns, free from solidifying. It's a very profound quatrain, that one. We know Heather, don't we? Yes, we do.
Yes.
I sort of feel apologetic for giving you something so profound, so fast, but it's an introduction. And I promise you that this is going to illuminate and be illuminated by the Vajrayana teachings endlessly. This is really the heart of the Vajrayana. In the Kagyu tradition, Rigpa is a term that's used more by Nyingmas. Trungpa Rinpoche was both, Nyingma Kagyu. His root guru was Nyingma, and he was born into the Kagyu sect. So he had both of them going. That's why we're getting both. But in the Kagyu sect, this term is called ordinary mind. In the sense, it's called, the Tibetan for it is Tamal Gishepa. Shepa is the word to know. Gi is a possessive particle like apostrophe S, and tamal means ordinary. So it's ordinariness's mind. And that's the same thing as Rigpa. It used to be very secret, this term. When he first taught us this, what we're discussing tonight, he asked us all to keep it secret. And for years, that term was not spoken, except among people to whom it had been introduced. I couldn't have talked to you this way about it. Now it's out and about. It's been, so many years since his death. And so when I first met Tsoknyi Rinpoche, who is a Nyingma teacher, he was talking endlessly about Rigpa. It's the heart of our path, coming back to this clear awareness. If this is the way we practice, you don't practice by just focusing your mind one-pointedly on an object. That's shamatha. I remember listening to a teacher named Karma Lingpa, who said, shamatha is not meditation. It's one-pointed focus on an object. That's not meditation. The only thing that's really meditation is coming back to Rigpa, to Vidya, this clear awareness. This is what each one of us should be doing as much as we can throughout the day. It's so relaxing every time we do it. We're giving up our aims, our stress, our feeling of having to do something. It can be frightening because you're giving up your orientation about who I am and where I'm going. We're just here, responsive, awake, responsive to whatever presents itself. This is the path. There's a letting go. There is a swimming in reality, you might call it. I just made that up, so don't trust it. But I'll be quiet for a while.
Sydney,
It's just a quick question. Quick question. Do we need low and sim at all?
Do we need them? Theoretically, you don't.
Do we just have them?
Huh?
But we just have them at least at
Well,
this stage.
they have to do, I mean, the higher forms of low are beginning to approach Rigpa. But SEM you don't need. But especially when we first begin to encounter this, we think, I've got to maintain my thinking mind. Otherwise, how am I going to know how to get from A to B? You know, how am I going to know how to make my pancakes in the morning? But you can. That's what these teachings are saying. Is you can. It'll be a very different, more vivid experience.
Just trying to figure out how to remember to pay my bill without a thought. But
You can pay bills without a thought. That's true.
okay.
What the thought is saying is, where's my paper? Oh, I've got to pay this bill or they're going to shut off my electricity. Oh, I don't have enough money to pay this bill. Oh, whatever it might be. All those thoughts can go. You just see the bill. It tells you it needs to be paid. You know how much money you've got in the bank. You pay it or not, depending.
Right. Okay.
We're cutting out all the anxiety. But you might wind up living a much different life. We all might. This is also entering into the realm of magic, in the sense of things that for instance, there are a lot of teachings that are called terma. Terma means hidden treasures. And the idea behind a terma is that a teacher long ago, in the distant past, had teachings which he or she knew were inappropriate for the people of their time. And so they hid them, knowing that they would be discovered in the future. When and by whom? Sometimes, often, hundreds of years hence. An example of this kind of teaching is all the teachings related to death, the so-called Bardo teachings, which you may have heard of. Some of you have even taken classes in it. All those teachings are terma. They were planted by Padmasambhava and discovered by a Tertun. A Tertun is a treasure revealer named Karmalingpa, his name is. Sometime, I think, in the 14th century. This is a common happening at these higher levels of teachings. Time becomes irrelevant. In fact, at the highest level of teachings, they say that time doesn't actually exist at all. It's just a mental construct created by SEM. SEM creates time. Thinking mind. Yes,
on.
Henry.
So, is there no true unconditional love and presence outside of Rigpa?
I'm not following this question. Say it again.
When I'm trying to ask, I'm probably not doing a good job, but the sense is that outside of Rigpa, there's too much activity. So you wouldn't be in a true state of presence for unconditional love. Is that true?
Well, unconditional love has a very particular meaning. It means that it has no conditions, right? All right. That isn't discussed so much in the teachings. In the teachings, what they say is that this reality that we see with the mind of Rigpa is made up of different sort of aspects. One is an aspect of knowingness, call it jnana. Another is an aspect of heart, call it karuna, compassion. Another is an aspect of efficiency, or the way things work together, call it upaya, skillful means. The best way that this is described is in the doctrine of what is called the Trikaya, the three bodies of the Buddha, which are three aspects of reality that one can only see with the eye of Vidya, of a Vidyadhara holder. The first aspect is the Dharmakaya, which I've already described as being the fact that nothing in this room right here where we are right now has any true being. Everything is without substance, doesn't exist in time. The three aspects that are attributed to true being are: one, that it exists through time; two, that it's independent. Nothing is independent. Everything is in a constant state of interdependence. And three, that things are unitary. They're one thing. Nothing is one thing. Everything is made up of infinite parts. Even atoms, right? They're made up of quarks, and quarks they keep finding smaller and smaller particles. There are no one things. It's just a constant fluxing. So that's the Dharmakaya. The Sambhogakaya has to do with that while nothing has any true being, existence, nonetheless, it appears, and as it appears, it communicates. It communicates what it is. The orange, the maroon of this sweater, the sound of this voice, the taste of whatever you were chewing, all of these things, they don't exist, Dharmakaya, and yet they communicate to us their qualities, what they are, vividly, beautifully, powerfully. And the third quality of reality is what's called the Nirmanakaya. Teachers are Nirmanakayas. When you a Tibetan teacher and you refer to them as a tulku is Tibetan for Nirmanakaya, which is Sanskrit. It means presentation body or apparition body, and the main quality of the Nirmanakaya is compassion. That is, all of this arises without existence so vividly and beautifully. It arises with huge heart, with huge love and joy. This is the compassion body of the Buddha, the Nirmanakaya. These three are in union right now, everywhere. And the way in which we begin to see this is by coming back into this present moment, here and now, clear, awake, giving up the machinations, the agendas of SEM, and coming back into this clear, open awareness of Rigpa. What Tsoknyi Rinpoche just talks endlessly about, still does. He's a real Rigpa maven. Teaches Rigpa.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
I hope so. Yeah. Years ago, I heard, I was asked to write an article about And what was happening was that University of Colorado and Naropa University were doing something together, and I got called up by someone at CU, and because Trungpa Rinpoche taught there when he first came to Boulder. He taught a class at the University of Colorado. And they asked me to write something about that. And I did. I wrote an article about one of the classes that he taught. It was the class on this, the three bodies of the Buddha. That article, you can find it online. It's just a recounting of his telling of this. And there's more to it, a lot more to it. There's more than is in that article, considerably. It's called, it was published, what's the magazine? Not the Shambhala.
Tricycle?
Tricycle.
Is it Tricycle?
Yes, it was published in Tricycle, among other places. And there it was called something like the Dharma in a Single Drawing. Because Rinpoche started that class on the three bodies of the Buddha by going up to the blackboard in front of these sleepy University of Colorado undergraduates sitting there in this classroom. And he had these big windows behind him going out to looking out at the Flatirons. It was gorgeous. But all these people were half asleep, some of them. And he went up to the blackboard and he drew a stick picture, a figure of a bird flying. It's just a stick drawing with chalk on the blackboard. And he said, "What is this a picture of?" Nobody wanted to answer. It was a picture of a bird flying, and And so finally, some kid says, "It's a picture of a bird." And he says, "It's a picture of the sky." And that was the way he launched into the three bodies of the Buddha. So I recommend reading that if you want to understand the three bodies of the Buddha. There's more to it than there's in that article, though. Oh, here it is. Wow, everybody's there. People are putting it in chat. Tricycle, the Dharma in a Single Drawing, I think it's called. Oh, and there's a shared file in the meeting, Valerie says, in chat. I think if you go into chat, you can download the file. I think we're going to end early this evening. This is kind of a conversation stopper, isn't it? Who else? I'm going to tell you a story that's been on my mind lately because I study with a Tibetan teacher now for 20 years. After Trungpa Rinpoche died, his name is Khenpo Namdrol. And he's teaching something called the Chetsen Nyingtig. Nyingtig means heart essence. And Chetsen refers to a particular individual who lived in the 14th century. His name was Chetsen Senge Wangchuk. And Chetsen Senge Wangchuk pretty much lived in Vidya, yogi. And he had what was called a pure vision of a teacher named Vimalamitra. Vimalamitra lived in the 8th century. Chetsen Senge Wangchuk lived in the 14th century. Vimalamitra was one of the two great teachers who brought the Great Perfection teachings to Tibet, called the Dzogchen teachings. And when Chetsen Senge Wangchuk had this pure vision, what it means is that for a period of about 2 or 3 weeks, he saw Vimalamitra in front of him as vividly as you and I see each other now, or more so, because we're seeing it through the filter of a computer screen. And during that time, Vimalamitra, 600 years prior, gave him those teachings, the Dzogchen teachings. Jetsun Senge Wangchuk, this is all within the realm of Rigpa. I'm telling you this. This is the magic of the world that we're being asked to enter. Jetsun Senge Wangchuk passed these teachings on to one of his students in what's called a single lineage transmission, meaning that the person who received them could only pass them on, him or herself, to one other person. So for a period of about 300 or 400 years, these were handed down from one person to one person to one person, never to many. Until finally, in the 19th century, a great teacher, a great Tibetan teacher, named, doesn't matter, but his name was Jamyang Khyentse Wangpo. Easy for me to say, huh? I've been saying it for a while. Jamyang Khyentse Wangpo. And Jamyang Khyentse one day realized that he was the reincarnation of Jetsun Senge Wangchuk, the guy in the 14th century who had the vision of Vimalamitra. And when he realized that, all of those teachings came flooding into him. And he wrote them down. And he made them available to select students. And especially he made them available to his good buddy, Jamgon Kongtrul the Great. Jamgon Kongtrul the Great was the original incarnation of Trungpa Rinpoche's guru, Jamgon Kongtrul of Shechen. He lived, Jamgon Kongtrul the Great lived in the late 1900s. Jamgon Kongtrul of Shechen was alive when Trungpa Rinpoche was in the 1940s and 50s. And Jamgon Kongtrul of Shechen wrote a commentary to it. And all of this is available. This is a different kind of world that we're being offered. A world in which something like this can happen. It's a world that transcends the ordinary logic of Sem and even Lo. And it has to do with Rigpa. Rigpa again and again. This coming into the present, and it's so simple, isn't it? I mean, isn't it ironic? It's utterly, what makes it so difficult is that it's so simple. We want to do something, but it's already here. All we have to do is acknowledge it, see it, come back to it. It's the fundamental basis of what we are. So I'm going on and on about it just because it's so simple and ordinary and there's not a lot to say. So you can see lots of things.
John, I have a question, Meg.
Yes.
I just wondered, how did this guy know suddenly that he was the reincarnation? Did he have some kind of epiphany or?
Yes, I guess so. I didn't ask. I've never heard, but yeah. I mean, Trungpa Rinpoche, you see, there are two kinds of terma. Terma are hidden treasures, which are planted, One of them is called mind terma, gomter in Tibetan. Gom means meditation, actually, or mind. And Trungpa Rinpoche, the Shambhala teachings, all came to him as gomter. He, according to my friends who were there when he would receive one, he would suddenly realize that he was getting a transmission, and he would ask for pen and paper, and he would start doing automatic writing, it looked like. And the text would come out. Now, if you go into the Shambhala teachings, once you do the first 5 levels 1 through 5, and you get to the next level, you will receive one of these Gomter, one of these mind teachings. It's called The Letter of the Black Ashe. It's a book, transcribed of his things. So Trungpa Rinpoche was a very prolific terton. He also found sater. Sater means physical objects. He didn't find any physical objects in this country, but in Tibet, he found many that were teachings. A lot of teachings come in the form of terma, hidden treasures. And what they call them is they say that there are two main kinds of teachings that come to us over the years. Kama, which means words, and terma, which means hidden teachings. Kama, they call the slow lineage, the slow passage. And you know what happens when you tell a story to someone, then they tell a story to someone, and they tell it the same story? It changes over time, right? In the telling. That's the problem with the Kama teachings, the words, because for a long time, they didn't have printing presses in Tibet, much less in India. And all the teachings were communicated either orally, or they had to be, if they were written down, they had to be copied, by hand. And it was an act of piety to copy the text. So very little was copied, relatively speaking. They were passed on orally, and they change over time. Terma, because they all of a sudden, 600 years later, the guy, gets a transmission or finds the text. It's unchanged. So they call that the fast lineage, the fast teaching. And there's a lot of terma, especially in the Nyingma sect, but Kagyu too. The Buddha himself planted terma. These Heart Sutra. He gave the Heart Sutra to his students on Vulture Peak Mountain during his lifetime, just north of Rajagriha in India. And, some of them, those students had heart attacks when they heard these teachings of the Heart Sutra, right? That's a famous line. Then, knowing that the people of his time were not ready for these teachings, the Prajnaparamita teachings, which are what the Heart Sutra is all about, he gave all of these teachings, and there are a lot more than the Heart Sutra, volumes and volumes of them. He gave them to the Nagas. Nagas are serpent deities who live in the watery depths. And specifically, he gave them to the Nagas who live in the ocean. And they kept them for centuries. The Buddha died 540 BC is the usual date. In about 150 AD, what is that? 500, 600, it's almost 700 years later, a great Indian Buddhist named Nagarjuna, his name literally means conqueror of the Nagas. He went down into the ocean to get these teachings that the Nagas had. And the story goes that he made all the Nagas sick through magic. And then they didn't know it was him. They just thought they'd all gotten sick. And then he offered to cure them in return for these teachings, the texts. And they agreed. He cured them. They gave him the teachings. He brought them back. So that's the myth, or the story of how we got the Prajnaparamita. You see, the Prajnaparamita teachings are in different recensions. We're familiar with the one in one page, the Heart Sutra. Thus have I heard once the Blessed One was dwelling in Rajagriha and Vulture Peak Mountain. That's the one-page version. There is the Prajnaparamita, the oldest, is supposed to be in 8,000 verses. There's one in 100,000 verses. And they're just different recensions of these. And that's what Nagarjuna got back from the Nagas, Naga Arjuna. So I'm telling you stories. Trip.
Yeah, so going back a little bit to Sem, I don't really understand, or I'm unclear about the relationship between Sem and the kleshas, the three poisons, and Alaya.
Alaya.
How they relate to each other. So I don't understand the relationship in particular between the kleshas and Sem. Is there a relationship?
Oh yeah. I mean, Alaya, let's skip Alaya because that's a complicated subject. It has several meanings. But Sem and the kleshas live in Sem. That's where they are. Sem is all about thoughts, I, other, habitual patterns that come up again and again and again. You know, I always use the example, you had an angry mother maybe, or an angry parent. And now you're walking down the street and the memory of that parent, you know, perhaps they're long gone, and the memory is stored somewhere back there in what's called the Alaya consciousness, actually, the eighth consciousness, which is kind of like Freud's unconscious. And the memory's back there, but you're not thinking about your mother. And suddenly you see someone approaching you on the street who looks like your mother. And all those feelings that you had for your mother arise out of your memory, your unconscious. And you see this person through that veil. Okay? That's SEM. That's what SEM is doing all the time. It's constantly bringing up these habitual patterns and interpreting the world through them. You and I could stand next to each other and watch an event, the same event, right? Standing shoulder to shoulder. And then we could recount what we had seen, and they would be very different, the recountings, because we would have seen it through the veil of our SEM, our habitual patterns. And each one of us would see it differently.
So is there any emotional component to SEM, or are emotions a manifestation of SEM?
Emotions are part of SEM. They are mental events that occur within SEM. In SEM, there are 52, as they say, well, it depends on the system, sometimes 50, 51, 52 mental events. And some of them are emotions, some of them are just conceptual thoughts, but they're all mental events. When you see a lot of the wrathful deities, I'm looking at one right there, I'm looking at one behind me on the wall, I'm looking at, let me just show you. This is Vajrayogini. She's a wrathful aspect of Prajna, actually, wisdom. Can you see that she's wearing a garland of skulls around her neck? A necklace, right? And she's Prajna. She's fierce. She's wrathful, okay? Semi-wrathful, actually, but pretty wrathful. When you see that garland of there it is, of their skulls around her head, or hanging down between her legs even. Those skulls are the 50 or 52 thoughts. It depends on the system, how many there are. Those are the thoughts that live in SEM, and she's wearing them as an ornament because she's so wise. She wears those thoughts. It's almost in mockery. This is typical of wrathful deities. They wear these garlands of thoughts. This is a sort of a like the flipping off SEM.
So just one follow-up question, because you've mentioned the 52 mental events in the past. Are these studied further on?
Actually, they're studied earlier on, and we're probably not going to do it. In the Hinayana teachings, the teachings of the Buddha are divided into three what are called baskets. The Tripitaka. Tri is three, Pitaka means baskets. They are the Sutra Pitaka, that's the first one of them. Sutra means dialogue. And these are the conversations that the Buddha had with his students, because almost all of his teachings were in conversation. The Vinaya Pitaka is the basket that contains all the rules of conduct for lay people, for monks and nuns, and some things in between. The third Pitaka or basket is called the Abhidharma Pitaka. And this is the ABHI, for those of you writing this down, Dharma, Dharma. And this is the Buddhist psychology at the Hinayana level. And it contains the teachings about the 5 skandhas, which most of you know about the 12 ayatanas and the 18 dhatus. That has to do with perception. You know, the 18 dhatus, which contain the 12 ayatanas, there's the eye, there's the mind, eye consciousness, which lives in the mind and looks through the organ of the eye and sees a visual object. That's 3. There's the ear consciousness in the mind, which listens through the organ of the ear and hears the sound. That's 3. You've got the six of these: eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, and mind itself, which looks through the organ of the mind and sees mental objects. And there are 18 dhatus. So the Tripitaka lines out the 18 dhatus. The 12 ayatanas are just a version of it. The 12 nidanas, which, if you remember, you know, those are the chain of cause and effect. The 5 skandhas, which describe ego. All of this is the Hinayana version of Buddhist psychology. And what they say is that these dharmas, which make up the 5 skandhas, are just rearranged into different orders to explain these phenomena, like how we believe in an ego, what is perception, what is karma, and they arrange these dharmas, they're called 52, in these different patterns to explain it. We haven't studied this. We're going beyond that pretty fast. And I think that's it. There was something else I was going to say. Oh,
Thank you.
all of these things are taken to actually exist, these dharmas. They say that a dharma, like for instance, the thought of anger, it arises in an instant and passes. You can have a chain of them, but each one of them only exists for an instant. They say that it arises and it lives as long, if you were to stack 60 flower petals and drive a pin through them. As the pin passes through each petal, that's how long a dharma lasts. It is born, it endures, and it dies. That experience, that dharma, might be the dharma of the perception of blue. It might be the dharma of anger. It might be the dharma of the taste of sweet. It might be the dharma of the feeling of tapping your arm. And all these exist only for a second, and then they're gone. Later in the Mahayana teachings, they say they don't actually exist at all. There's only shunyata, nothing as any true being. But at the Hinayana level of the teachings, they take these things to be existence. And there are physical dharmas, there are mental dharmas, and there are the third class of dharmas, which we won't get into, which actually are neither physical nor mental. For example, nirvana is a dharma. So you just got a brief introduction to the Abhidharma, the third basket, the Tripitaka. And there are people who study it. There was a guy named Stephen Goodman. He was a student of Tartang Toku's. He passed, he's dead now. But Stephen used to get people together, like us, and we would make up an Abhidharma. We'd say, what is it? See, the dharmas are the elements of existence that we experience. That's what these dharmas are. And people made up their own Abhidharmas. There are many different versions of the Abhidharma, of this list of elements. Herbert Gunther called them these dharmas because they only exist for a split second. He called them atoms of experience, like the experience of sweet, the experience of blue, the experience of anger. They're just atoms of experience. Well, you're getting a lot more. This is not the subject. Trungpa Rinpoche didn't want to teach it very much. because he wanted to get us further along down the road into Shunyata and beyond that into Tantra. But we could.
Oh, please don't.
Sorry, what?
I said, please don't. I remember when it was presented, it was a grind for me.
It was a grind, yeah. We're not going to do it. Not only that, but it's denied in the Mahayana. They say those dharmas don't actually exist at all. You know, they have no true being. It's all shunyata. Well, everybody, we're almost at 7 o'clock. Any other questions? Rigpa is going to become a big feature in the teachings, and Yeshe. Hope it isn't confusing the Tibetan and the Sanskrit. Rigpa and Yeshe, Vidya and Jnana. Well, shall we close if there are no further comments or complaints? You can file a complaint. All right. Who's doing the chants? I forgot. Oh yeah, Sue. Sue, I'll put up the chants. I'll mute everybody and we'll close. Whoops. Nope. Hold on a second. I haven't got the chants here. There we go. Nope.
I've got them right here if you want me to put it up.
I think I got it.
Yeah, I got it.
Can you see it?
Oops.
We've dedicated the offering. Here we go with a prayer for peace. Okay, hold on. I'm gonna Barry, can you mute all?
Okay,
And Sue, unmute yourself.
1 second. Okay, muting all.
By the blessings of enlightened and compassionate ones, by the power of my positive actions of 3 times, and my prayers of pure aspiration, may wars, conflicts, epidemics, and all other maladies dissolve in this world, and may the earth and all who live on this earth enjoy the abundance of well-being. May all learn to live lovingly with each other. By this merit, may all obtain omniscience, may it defeat the enemy wrongdoing, from the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death, from the ocean of samsara, may it free all beings. By the confidence of the golden sun of the great East, may the lotus garden of the Rignan's wisdom bloom. May the dark ignorance of sentient beings be dispelled. May all beings enjoy profound, brilliant glory.
Thank you, John. That was amazing.
Thanks,
Thank you,
everybody.
everyone.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
John. Thanks,
Thank
Sue.
you.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Sue.
John.
Thank you.
John.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Karen Sue.
Good night,
Thank
everyone.
you, Sue. Thank you, John. Thank you,
Thanks,
everyone.
thanks, everybody.
Good night, everybody.
Hey, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.
Hi, George. So Barry, what do you think?
Stopped recording.
Oh, yeah.